You know, at Redraft in 5, we do not do introductions, but one thing we drop is hot take. We're giving you 10 hot takes for the 2024 seasons. Coop, start us out.
All right, let's start it hot, baby. Everyone understands that Alvin Kamara could be a RB1 in PPR formats. Last year, he was the RB3 in PPR points per game, right? From weeks 3 to 17 when he played, he was the RB, right? I believe that this year he can be the RB1 overall in PPR formats. Clint Kubiak's scheme comes to town. They bring in the fullback. They drafted a left tackle in the first round. This guy was on pace for 112 targets. That's 6.5 targets a game. Next highest player, Breece Hall, at 5.5. Don't be surprised if Alvin Kamara is still one of the best PPR running backs in the league.
You know me, I like my running backs a little bit younger than Kamara, Coop, but I love your conviction, and that's exactly what we're looking for. And I'll start out mine as, you know, we're going hot and spicy out the gate. I'm going to go historical spicy here. And last year, CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 1 overall. Now, we haven't seen a wide receiver 1 overall finisher repeat since Antonio Brown. I think CeeDee Lamb does it, and he actually gives us a repeat performance. But that's not the hot take. The hot take is Lamb sets an NFL record for targets. He is going to break Marvin Harrison Sr.'s record, and he's going to end up with 210 targets. Only seen 3 players all time break the 200 target barrier. And the last one to do so was Julio Jones back in 2015. You're going to see CeeDee Lamb do it. It's going to be right out the gate. There is not only a lack of wide receiver target competition, but there is also a lack of teammate touch competition. The running back position is going to be paced by Rico Dowdle. We anticipate Jake Ferguson, a guy that we're not in love with his talent by any means, is probably the best bet to be the second target on the team. This is the CeeDee Lamb show. No team is more dependent on an offensive skill position, non-quarterback, than Dallas with CeeDee Lamb. He breaks records this year, Coop.
Wow,
what do you think of that one?
Calling for the all-time record, that's pretty spicy. But the thing is, they gave him the money. There's nothing holding them back now. So I can feel it. I can see it. All right, I got one here. Let's go to my favorite position, tight end. All right. So for 7 straight years in a row, a tight end has come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5. Most recently, Sam Laporta, tight end 18, just finished tight end 1. Evan Ingram's done it twice. This year, I'm looking at Hunter Henry as a guy who is already very good in man-to-man situations, very good in the red zone. That's why he scored 6 touchdowns on a team that only threw 16 last year, right? This is a guy who can handle that aspect. They just weren't getting him quality targets, and they weren't manufacturing him touches. 0 tight end screens last year for the Patriots. Alex Van Pelt comes in this year after calling the second most tight end screens of any offensive coordinator last year with the Browns. I think Hunter Henry is going to have just as much success in the red area, if not more so. I think he's going to get more manufactured touches, and all that combined with a little better QB play. Now we're talking about this year's guy to potentially come from outside the tight ends we're drafting to finish as one that we're using to win leagues down the stretch. Hunter Henry.
And I really like this one, Coop. And one of your big tenets at the tight end position has always been looking for guys who can lead their team in targets or finish number 2 in targets. And I think if we looked at the makeup of the New England Patriots, unless one of these wide receivers really emerges over the first month of the season, then they're going to sort of cannibalize one another. The consistency on the team is going to be the 2 running backs and Hunter Henry. We already know that he's an effective player also around the goal line, so he could be aided with some touchdowns as well. And I love your Alex Van Pelt stat. I'm going to go with a much younger player than Hunter Henry. You go with like the old guys, Kamara and Henry. I'm going to go real young here. I'm going to go Brian Thomas Jr. outscores Christian Kirk in PPR. And this is one where you're starting to see the ADPs converge a little bit, like super late. But for most of the summer, it was Christian Kirk is like a guy we're steaming up. He's going to be the new wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville. Now you're hearing rumblings that they're going to be in two wide receiver sets a lot more this year. And it's going to be Brian Thomas out there with Gabe Davis. Kirk will be on the field for 3 wide receiver sets. And I'm sure they're going to work him in on some 2 wide receiver sets. But he's got to really thread the needle and be a guy who catches a lot of passes. Brian Thomas is going to be a guy who can do this on explosive plays, on big plays, on touchdown catches. And I think touchdown catches are going to be one of the big drivers of his success. Calvin Ridley had the most end zone targets of any player in football last year. A lot of those are going to go to Brian Thomas. Thomas has that juice, Coop. And this is a guy that's young, I think he's going to remind people of younger DK Metcalf, and I think he's going to have a smash season as a rookie.
Ooh, I like that, man. And I will say this to folks, you got to keep in mind with guys like Christian Kirk and Khalil Shakir that play the slot, but also have tight ends on the team that play the slot. When these teams are looking at the tight ends, everyone knows that Evan Ingram and Dalton Kincaid are not good blocking tight ends, but what they are good at is blocking as a slot receiver, right? Like if you're asking who's a better run blocker, Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram, it's a no-brainer. Same with Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. So oftentimes that's what it boils down to. Who's the better blocker? So we could end up seeing a part-time player, like you say. So be very careful with that. I'll give one here that I'm kind of going against the grain here because people don't like to root for this player. I don't necessarily like to root for him, but guess what? I don't care about anything other than fantasy points. Fantasy points don't care about your feelings, Theo. So for me, Deshaun Watson, I look at a player that if you sort every quarterback all time by fantasy points per game, this guy's 3 on the list. It goes Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson. And that number for him, his career number, is just over 20 points per game. Last year, despite having the messed up shoulder, the broken shoulder, he was averaging around 18 points per game. He was willing to run a little bit. He was willing to throw. It didn't look pretty. But if this guy comes back healthy with Amari Cooper and David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy and now no Nick Chubb to start the season, there's a chance that this guy has to throw a bit. And there's a real possibility that this guy is still good. I mean, we're giving out comeback player of the year awards to Geno Smith and Joe Flacco, but you're telling me this guy at his age can't come back and have a solid season? Do not be surprised when Deshaun Watson is a QB1. And right now he's being drafted outside the top 20.
Yeah, I'm getting Deshaun Watson a couple times. I've gotten him in like the round 17, round 18.
Free.
It's free right now. And he's also a guy that, if you're shout out to our friends at Dynasty Trades in 5, it's a good player to kick the tires on dynasty wise, because a lot of people think he's on some downward trajectory. He's not some old man. He can bounce back. And I love that you brought up sort of the makeup of the team, where I thought what was interesting move right around cut day was cut Deonta Foreman and your backup running back is Pierre Strong. Now they bring Deonta Foreman back, but it's going to be Pierre Strong as the number 2 behind Ford. To me, that says up tempo. That says they're going to do a lot more interesting things. Ken Dorsey is also a guy where he could gain a lot more value, where he sort of was left for dead as a coordinator, bounces back in Cleveland, and I think this offense could punch up. Coop, we get Dallas versus Cleveland, so we're going to see this Deshaun Watson against CeeDee Lamb. This game is going to pop off in week 1. That's one you have to circle right now.
And they changed the comeback player of the year award, the criteria for it, because they don't want to give it to Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. That's why they changed it this offseason. So, well, actually, Rodgers could still win it, but yeah, they don't want to give it to Watson or Russ. That's for sure. But
absolute haters. Who wins Cleveland Dallas, Coop?
I mean, I was shocked to see the over under for that game is only 42. Did you see that? It looks like it's going to be kind of a bruiser game. I don't know. I personally think that it's going to be Cleveland. I think Dallas, as you kind of pointed out, maybe a little too one-dimensional. So I think, CeeDee Lamb obviously at the top of every lineup, probably a DFS play. But I think at the end of the day, Cleveland just is a more well-rounded team.
Yeah, and Cleveland was really good on defense last year for a lot of long periods of time. Mm-hmm. That game's at home. They're favorites. Really, really fun one. But they're all fun week 1 because we've been missing this. And one thing that's a crazy stat is Garrett Wilson has had 7 different starting quarterbacks in his time in New York in 2 years. That's almost criminal. He's proved himself to be a truly elite target earner, one of the best target earners in football. He was 4th in the NFL last year in total targets. Unbelievable year in terms of rookie targets. He has the 2nd most catches by a Jets player in a 2-year period all time, but he hasn't had the touchdowns, and he hasn't had the quality of the offense to propel him to big-time fantasy production. So it's sort of been a guy where we know the talent is there. We just need better quality targets, and we're going to get it this year with Aaron Rodgers. And Garrett Wilson is going to give you a top 3 scoring season at the wide receiver position. I think Garrett Wilson might end up being the league winner, especially in those early drafts, Coop, where people were able to get him at like the 201, 202. He's come up, but still 110, 111 Garrett Wilson could prove to be a unbelievable force on your roster. I think this has been a guy that struggled to catch touchdown passes. He's not going to struggle at all this year. And one guy I'm super excited about this year is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, I think, is set to absolutely smash this year. Coop, Garrett Wilson has had 7 different starting quarterbacks during his time in New York, and he has been one of the great target earners in the NFL. despite just this continual change at the quarterback position. Last year, he was 4th overall in the NFL in targets earned. He's had 2 incredible years with all the metrics you want to see from a wide receiver 1, except for final numbers. This year, Garrett Wilson does it. Year 3, Garrett Wilson gives you top 3 wide receiver numbers. He might be the league winner, Coop, because you saw some early drafts where people were able to get him at like the 201, 202. And even at the 110 where he's settling in now, he still looks like he could be an absolute steal at that position. Garrett Wilson smash season. And I think next year he could be a top 5 pick in redraft.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, the guy who was on the cover of the Fantasy Alarm draft guide last year was going in the same spot, the league winner, CeeDee Lamb, that you already mentioned, right?
Yep.
It's like, if you want this guy, you got to take him. You got to strike while the iron's hot. And I'll tell you this, he's not even the only guy from that class that's dealt with the poor quality targets and the lack of touchdowns.
Drake London, man.
Drake London, Chris Olave. You know who leads that class in touchdown right now? The wide receiver?
It's probably going to be something gross.
It's Christian Watson.
Wow, that's crazy. On
Watson,
1 year.
Even with the injuries, he has like 13, I think it is. And Olave, London, Wilson, they've all struggled to get quality targets. So hopefully those guys could take a step this year. I'll tell you what, speaking of Chris Olave, I actually like him and I like the other wide receiver over there. I think the target's going to be highly consolidated in that offense. So I'm drafting a lot of Rashid Shaheed. And I would not be surprised if this time next year we're sitting around and the way we talk about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Nico Collins and Tank Dell and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, that we're not talking about Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed in the same way. And the reason that is that it's a very similar offense coming to town. They all are from that Shanahan coaching tree. Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan, Bobby Slowick in Houston, and now Clint Kubiak with the Saints. And what they're doing is they're bringing over the fullback, they're bringing over blocking tight ends, they're bringing over that highly consolidated style of offense. If you look at the 49ers last year, right, Kyle Juszczyk and Charlie Warner combined for over 800 snaps. They played more snaps than Brandon Ayuk, those two combined. They also played more snaps than Deebo Samuel, and they only got 20 targets. That consolidates everything among the top 2 wide receivers, the tight end, and the running back. That's why we like Kamara. It's why we like Chris Olave. And I think that Rashid Shaheed, in that scheme, with the consolidation and the cheat motion and all the creative things that this coaching tree likes to do before the snap, I think Chris Olave could go from being a field stretcher type guy that, returns a punt or a kick every now and again, like early Tyreek Hill was, to a guy that every week we're watching this guy and saying, what's he going to do? So Rashid Shaheed this year, potentially, honestly, the ceiling for him could even be wide receiver 1. I think he could end up being a wide receiver 2 for sure. And where he's going at like wide receiver 50-something, slam dunk.
We drafted him together in our NFFC draft, Coop, and I have bags of Shaheed. I don't think I see him quite as the upside you do, but I certainly see him as the number 2 target in that offense, especially with how much Taysom Hill is going to be involved, where Taysom Hill, I think, is going to take away from Juwan Johnson really being a threat to take a big step forward in his career. Shaheed's interesting because he's had multiple smash games. He has the speed. I like the argument a lot. They need a secondary receiver to emerge. It's got to be Shaheed. His competition with guys like A.T. Perry, it's just, there's nobody scary to take anything away. I love that you're bullish on Olave. I agree on Olave a lot. I think that Olave is actually going to see a little more work on the intermediate routes just because of the ball in the hands of your best playmaker. But hey, there's been multiple games in the career where they've both been on the field at the same time, and you've seen Shaheed actually outperform Olave. So I love your bold conviction. And Coop, all he's got to do is finish as a wide receiver 3, and this is an easy win for you as well because you're able to get him as like a wide receiver 5. Love the bold take.
That's all he really needs. I guess the only real threat, in my opinion, is Cedric Wilson. Just because Cedric Wilson, he played for the Dolphins, so he knows the scheme already. But here's the thing. If it's Cedric Wilson, then who cares? There's no upside there with Cedric Wilson. If it's Shaheed, now there's upside. So that's why I'm willing to lean into it. It's a very late pick that, you know what? If he's not the guy, back to the waiver wire mill.
I'll go with a little higher profile guys than Rashid Shaheed. And I'm going to say we've seen it, Coop, now that rookie wide receivers have been incredible out the gate. We've seen it for 3 out of the last 4 years where you've had a rookie wide receiver finish inside the top 5 scores of the position. Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, all 3 did it. And then Garrett Wilson, his rookie season was awesome, but it was a low-end wide receiver too because, again, the quality of the targets. But guys have been coming out and performing right away. And this year, the ADP market has reflected it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the highest drafted wide receiver of all time in redraft, and Malik Neighbors would be the highest drafted wide receiver of all time in redraft, but he happens to be in the same year as Marvin Harrison Jr. Both of these players, though, are going to return value on where you selected them. We haven't ever seen it where you've had two rookie wide receivers finish as wide receiver ones. The Jamar Chase season, Jalen Waddle nearly did it, but he didn't. This year, they do it easily. Both of these players, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, finish inside of the top 10 scorers at the position. The big takeaway here is draft as much Malik Neighbors as possible. I think he's going to have 150 targets out the gate. He is going to be the focal point of the entire New York Giants offense. Much like my argument with CeeDee Lamb, you don't have a running back that is going to command touches at the same level as some of these players having to deal with like real alpha candidate running backs. So for me, it's a Malik Neighbors is one of the best values right now at the wide receiver position. If you're in leagues where you can still get him at like the end of the third round, early fourth, absolutely smash that value. You're starting to see him go in the second round in some of these late high stakes drafts, Coop.
Yeah, and I think teams are actually finally starting to understand leverage, the contract leverage that comes with these windows, right? Where back in the day, it was like, you know, you only used a couple guys in your offense and your rookies didn't play. You drafted them, they just hung in the background, and then there was the year 3 wide receiver breakout. But teams are understanding now that if your wide receiver breaks out in year 3 and doesn't help you till year 3, he's going to hold out, and then you're going to have to pay him. I mean, look at these guys. None of these guys are playing the 4th year on their contracts without a deal, right? So teams are realizing that you only want to spend up on these players, just like quarterback. Like, you draft a quarterback when he's going to play for you right away, except for the Falcons, I guess, who draft a quarterback who isn't going to play for them right away. But for most teams, they realize left tackle, quarterback, edge rusher, cornerback, wide receiver. If you're going to draft a player high, he's going to play for you right away, and you're going to get that leverage right away. And these teams understand that with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, and that's why you get Justin Jefferson filling in for Diggs. That's how you get Calvin Ridley leaving, and you get Brian Thomas Jr. To circle back to your other take. So teams are actually realizing now what leverage they have, and they're let play, which I love.
Yeah, rookie wide receivers are the new rookie quarterbacks. It's the cheat code. The contracts are reflective of it. Look at the amount of money Brandon Ayuk got. Look at the amount of money all of these guys are getting. So why not get what you can out of them? You're seeing it where guys are stepping into the college football, able to play right away. You're seeing way more freshman breakouts at the wide receiver position, and now it's more reflective in the NFL. Guys come in the league, they're ready to go, and you're going to see a lot of it this year. It's a great rookie wide receiver class, and those guys at the top are just exceptional. What else do you got, Coop?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, right along that same line, we're actually seeing it with tight end now too, right? Where teams will go out and they'll draft a Sam Laporta or a Dalton Kincaid and use them right away. And what they're understanding is what teams like the Ravens and the Chiefs and every Chan Gailey team ever has understood, which is that a lot of these tight ends are just as good at catching the ball as the slot receivers or even outside wide receivers, but they're much better at blocking, right? That's what we saw with Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. Like the Chiefs are, for all intents and purposes, a 2 tight end team, with Travis Kelce basically playing wide receiver and Noah Gray playing 60% of the snaps in line. I look at the Denver Broncos, and I think that Greg Dulcich, a player that is currently 2% owned on Yahoo leagues, 2%. I think this guy could be a tight end 1 in fantasy football and potentially even higher than that. The conditions we look for are guys that could be a top 2 target on their team. Jerry Jeudy is gone. Marvin Mims is in the doghouse. And Greg Dulcich's biggest competition for slot snaps, big slot player Tim Patrick, just got cut. This guy could be the Jimmy Graham type player in this Sean Payton offense. The role that he calls a joker role, where you're playing out of position for what you normally do. Alvin Kamara for him was a running back that would play some wide receiver. That's a joker role. Jimmy Graham for him was a joker tight end that could also play some wide receiver. Greg Dulcich is in line to have that job this year. If people come to me, they say, "Oh, what about Adam Trautman? What about Adam Trautman?" Adam Trautman is an inline blocking tight end. In 2019, Nick Boyle played 768 snaps. He was the starting tight end for the Ravens. Mark Andrews only played 495. He was top 5 tight end in fantasy because he ran all the routes. Last year, Lucas Kroll, the backup of backup tight ends, Kroll Warwick King, ran more routes than Adam Trautman. Greg Dulcich is going back into that role. As long as he can stay healthy, which is the only caveat here, he has big-time upside. Do not be shocked if he is one of the top tight end waiver ads in the early weeks and ends up a guy that could be in your lineup the entire season.
I drafted him a few times this weekend, and I'm agreeing with you on this one, and I think it's going to be Devon Vele and Josh Reynolds are like the wide receiver target competition. Cortland Sutton's also a clear-cut wide receiver one on the team, Coop, but you haven't seen Sutton ever have a season where he's commanding just an exceptional amount of raw targets. He's also not necessarily the best fit with a low ADOT guy like Bo Nix. Dulcich was a guy that had more dynasty value a year ago at this time than Trey McBride, because Dulcich flashed as a rookie and Trey McBride was so out the gate. Dulcich was also a day 2 draft pick. It's not like Coop is recommending some dude who was like a 7th rounder undrafted free agent. Dulcich was a 2-time all Pac-12 player at UCLA and was a converted wide receiver, which we love seeing that at the tight end spot too. So I think this is a very appropriate sleeper for you, Coop. And it's not hard to see him overtaking those guys for targets. Really, really fun one. I'll go back.
He's free. 2%. 2% rostered, Theo.
And what kind of sickos are getting in your DMs about Adam Troutman at this point in Troutman's career? I mean, it's like, guys, give it up. It's not maybe like University of Dayton football fans. I don't know.
I think it is. If you're going to bet, you want to bet against blocking tight ends, right? So we have our guy, the big slot guy. You want to bet against blocking tight ends. You want to bet against journeyman, right? Like last year, we bet Puka Nacua against DeMarcus Robinson. That turned out pretty great, right? And in this case, the journeyman, of course, is Josh Reynolds. You look up journeyman in the dictionary and the picture of Josh Reynolds right there.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And bet against rookies. That's the other one, because rookies can also just fall flat on their face. A lot of times we think about, what if the rookie does this? What if the rookie does that? Without thinking, what if the rookie is N'Keal Harry? Then there's room for someone else to be the guy. You know what I mean? So those are the places I like to bet against. And Greg Dulcich is betting against a bunch of that. Troy Franklin as a 4th round rookie, and Josh Reynolds doing whatever Josh Reynolds does, and Adam Troutman. I mean, those are the guys we bet against, and the person to bet on is Greg Dulcich.
If there's a team where the running backs and tight ends are going to beat their ADP, it's probably Denver, just because of the lack of the wide receiver target competition, and
Joe
also
Lombardi. Joe
Lombardi and Bo Nix. Joe Lombardi and Bo Nix are like a perfect match.
Death by 1,000 cuts, dude.
Yeah.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Dumped off.
Wrap us up here with one last one, Theo. Let's get everybody out of here before we get too hot. We're scorching people here.
Okay, so this one is going to be not a good one for a lot of you Jonathan Taylor at the 1-2 turn drafters, but Travis Etienne is going to outscore Jonathan Taylor. And a lot of times, Coop, you can get him 20 picks later. Most of the time, at least a full round later. Etienne occasionally snuck into late 2nd rounds. Most of the time, you're talking about a guy who lived in the middle of the 3rd round all redraft season. Taylor was a guy who had to use a very early 2nd or late 1st on. Taylor's like 9th overall in Yahoo ADP right now. It's wild to me. But I look at Travis Etienne as a guy who took a huge step forward as a receiver, and the team seems way more comfortable with him in terms of utilizing him out of the backfield. This is a guy who came in the NFL with that as a reputation, played with Trevor Lawrence for a long time, Clemson teammate. The haters and the faders will say that he lived on touchdowns, and he was certainly very efficient with touchdown scoring last year, but the yards per carry is a number that can easily come up. If we look at Travis Etienne's yards per carry from 2022 versus 2023, it was a full yard more. I think that you're going to see his numbers closer in terms of efficiency to the 2022 numbers, with added usage as a receiver. Everything about it screams a player that could be top 5 in terms of running back scoring. And on the flip side, Jonathan Taylor is a guy where if he's going to deliver on that ADP, he has to lead the NFL in rushing yardage or rushing touchdowns. There's really no two ways about it for me, Coop, because he's boxed out in terms of overall target ceiling, and he's playing next to potentially the biggest touchdown vulture at the quarterback spot. Anthony Richardson could lead all quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns this year, and he'll be towards the leaders in rushing yardage. So Taylor is going to get vultured continually. Draft the other AFC South running back a little while later if you're in one of these late drafts.
Yeah, a lot of the things you said about JT there probably also apply to Saquon Barkley. I know people don't want to hear
100%.
it, but you can kind of leverage that, right? And I'll tell you what, with Etienne, you mentioned the Clemson connection. Trevor Lawrence has had his back every step of the way. Very rare do we ever hear a rookie quarterback speak up about anything, let alone Trevor Lawrence, who's a very mild-mannered guy. But Urban Meyer, during that circus, Trevor Lawrence spoke up, and he was like, what the heck are we doing with Carlos Hyde? we have this guy who's so much better. So that year was a wash. And then last year, people forget, Trevor Lawrence played hurt basically the entire year. Like, that offense was not firing on all cylinders the way that it can. And the touchdowns, those obviously come along with a good offense, but just moving the ball, generating more yards, staying on the field for longer, that's going to come with a healthy Trevor Lawrence. I'm like you. I'm bullish on this offense across the board. Maybe like yourself, not so much Christian Kirk or Gabe Davis, but I feel like Brian Thomas Jr., Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, and Trevor Lawrence himself, I mean, there's a lot of value to be had here. So very interested to see how that can go.
Yeah, no, I love it. And we're going to be bringing you videos like this and podcasts on Redraft in 5 every single week during the regular season. Coop, let everyone know what else you have coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fantasy Alarm is where all my stuff lives. As always, you can catch me on SiriusXM on the Fantasy Alarm Show on 6 to 8 p.m. Thursdays and Fridays, and also 10 to 11 a.m. NFL Sunday morning coming up this Sunday. I'll be writing the Waiver Wire article that will be free over there, and Theo and I are probably going to pop on here to give you some Waiver Wire takes as well, which will include the yin and yang tight end stuff. So if you're interested in these tight end takes, tight end upside, the stuff that we've made all our money on, that's probably going to live over here on this show. So thanks for joining us. Hit that like and subscribe. What about you, Theo? What's popping?
Yeah, so like you, I write the Waiver Wire column at PlayerProfiler. I look forward to talking about our Waiver Wire ads together here at Redraft in 5. I also write a couple other articles every week, just like you. I'm in the streets. Coop, you can find all my podcasts over at PlayerProfiler. You could also find I write a weekly article at The Athletic. I have an article, I think, coming out for them tomorrow, and I'm doing a weekly article at Fantasy Points as well. So we're sort of everywhere in the streets, but you're going to find us here at Redraft in 5. Let's crush it this season, guys. We're going to help you win your league. And how great is it to have NFL football back?
I cannot wait. And we have football on Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday. Doesn't get any better than that.
No doubt. I'll see you soon, my man.